Hi, this is Wendy Yellen, and this is the Art of Transformation. It would really help us to reach other people like you if you would like and subscribe to these audios and videos. Thank you so much. It really helps. All right, so today I'm doing something a little different. This is audio rather than video. And I want to tell you about an experience I had with someone where I was working with really intense, horrible feeling trauma. And the reason that I want to talk to you about this is that so many people are afraid of dealing with the tough stuff, the really difficult traumas and so forth, and they want to shy away from it, or they don't want to go deep in, and they're not sure it's worth it. And if you've had any kind of trauma in your life, whether it was like a physical accident or sexual or physical or emotional abuse or the loss of a loved one or anything along those lines, you know that those hurt. And it's really important to be able to deal with those traumas in a way which no longer stops you from engaging with life. Because so often what happens when you have a trauma is, it's that old don't go into the kitchen because if you touch the burner, you'll get burnt, so we better not go into the kitchen. There's that kind of feeling. The whole area feels scary, difficult, and dangerous. And yet, that's actually not true. It just feels like it. So I'll give you an example. The reason I'm not doing a video right now is that I broke my elbow and had surgery, tripped on a leash of our puppy, or the puppy got underneath my feet. In any case, it takes a lot more energy for me to dress myself well enough for a nice video for you. So I figured, okay, I'll use less energy and still get the important piece out, which is the audio. And at some point, I'm sure I'll do the videos too. However, what I've noticed is that every time I see our puppy near my husband, I'm terrified because the puppy's 70 pounds, and even though she's 9 months, she's a lot to handle, and I'm more afraid for him now. So the trauma is making me more afraid of life. Now, obviously, I'm working with this, but I can really see how it works like that. And that's just a tiny example of something that is, yes, traumatic, but not as traumatic as a horrible illness or a death or abuse. So the reason I will really be helping you here, the reason it'll really help you here to listen and to take this in and think about your own situation is if we can allay just a bit some of your fear of going into and dealing with the trauma, it can open up a whole avenue for you of yourself. Here's an example. The other day I was working with a relatively new client who had some horrible sexual abuse as a child. And if you know anything about sexual abuse, it affects us on so many levels. It affects you and how you feel about your body, about yourself as a person, about the person that abused you, about yourself in relationship to the world, about your self-worth, and so much more. So you would think, and she cried a lot during this session, deeply. We were on Zoom, so I could also see her. And one of the most amazing things that happened, and which is exactly actually why I wanted to talk to you about this today, is that at the end, as she was signing off of Zoom, she had this huge smile on her face, and she was going, "Wow, wow, wow." And I'm, of course, so happy for her that she feels so much relief and so much lightness after such an intense, deep, difficult session, but also that it's reverberating through her. And even though we'd finished the work and she's signing off, it's spinning its wonderful weave around her and inside of her and creating this feeling of energy and excitement and well-being, and you can feel it. So this is what's actually possible when you really do the deep work, the relief that you can get. Now, most of us are afraid of what will come out. So I have another client who also suffered from sexual abuse as a young girl in a very different kind of way, and she doesn't want to deal with it. It feels way too painful to even think about it. She's quite scared about what it'll mean and probably what she thinks it says about her. And maybe she's afraid that she'll have to deal with that abusive person in a different way. There may be many, many things in her mind. And I imagine that eventually we are going to be able to work with it as she feels more able to go into that realm. However, what she's showing is what most people think, which is that if you go into the really hard stuff, you're going to feel worse. And as you can see from my first example, that's just not true. If you go in a Eidetic way, and I can only speak about Eidetics because at this point that's the only kind of work I'm willing to do. If you go in an Eidetic way, what comes through are the potentials, the power, the energy that's been buried underneath the memory and the crust, literal crust, sometimes concrete crust of your history. So my client who's more concerned about working on the abuse, so for her, it creates a holding back in herself and in life that is painful for her and painful to see. So there are many, many different aspects to the kind of work that you can be doing that may bring to you so much more relief than you think you can get. So let's talk about that for a little bit. I had a client tell me today, a private client she said, when I first started working with you, I was certain that I was supposed to make positive images and create a positive story for my life, and that was supposed to make me feel better. She says, of course, I don't think like that anymore. She brought up a wonderful point. Oh, and she also added, she said, what I realize now that some of the most difficult eidetic image work that I've done has always given me the biggest breakthroughs. So let's talk about both parts of what she said. First part one, why is it that making a positive story, that trying to solve in your head the situation is in many cases 180 degrees opposite of where would be helpful for you to go? In other words, trying to fix it, trying to make it all right, forgiving the person, forgiving yourself, just, okay, bygones be bygones, it is what it is, all that kind of stuff. Usually, what people are actually saying and feeling inside is, I can't do anything about it, so I'm just going to try to forget about it, brush it under the rug, move on with my life. It's usually a very superficial answer, but it's all that most people can come up with. Now, I'm not talking about a truly Zen approach where the person is really in the space, that open, expansive space. I'm talking about when, for most of us, we try to control the feelings or control the reactions because, after all, quote unquote, it is what it is. Or, after all, there's nothing I can do about it. Or, it feels horrible, I've got to make it feel better. This, in my opinion, is a big problem and a huge reason why most of us engage in trying to feel better and then don't. It becomes a very more superficial kind of head answer rather than an answer that affects our heart and our bodies and shines through our eyes and in our spirit. That's real change. That's deep change. And that's the only kind of change that I'm interested in dealing with, and the kind of change that I always am talking to you about. Why would we try to make a situation better? Why would we try to think it better? Try to put a positive spin on it? Well, we're trying to solve the problem of the fact that it feels awful. And we're trying to solve it with our head. But the woman that I mentioned to you in the beginning, who is going, wow, 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 after dealing with some of the most intense abuse you could imagine, the reason that she was feeling that way is because instead of having someone come to the rescue in her mind, or thinking it didn't happen, or whatever way a person would try to grapple with the past, she didn't control her mental reaction. She didn't, very important, she didn't stay in the overwhelming physical memory of things. Not just the sexual memory, but the anger and the helplessness and powerlessness and so on. Instead, she went into the memory, quasi-memory, we'll say memory, but it's more than a memory. And she really dealt with what she was seeing and feeling, but also what she didn't get a chance to feel and express. And from that connecting with the sadness and from that connecting with the sadness of her, starting again here, Rebecca, and when she connected viscerally with the image that included the sadness and the powerlessness and the horror of it, she also was able to connect with the parts of her that were buried at that time. Power, effectiveness, legitimate and real anger, and all of the power that comes from it. So the gift within the trauma is that in the way we worked with it, she was able to release the parts of her that have been buried for years, decades. Not just buried in relationship to that abuse, but buried in life, buried in the way she's been unable to pursue certain aspects of her business despite enormous talent, buried in relationship to her partner who she adores, buried in relationship to who she gets to be in the world because of feelings of not worthiness and so forth. There is so much that gets buried when a trauma or a difficult incident happens. And when you just kind of try to make it right in your head, you're losing all of that delicious, wonderful reconnection with, organic reconnection with being able to actually feel yourself, feel your own oats, feel your own energy without it getting stopped and curtailed and pushed back inside of you, where it can create things, even disease, and certainly feelings of worthlessness and so much more. Those are the gifts within an eidetic image. Those are the gifts when you go deep into your consciousness instead of just making a superficial answer to the problem. Now, look, I understand that if we don't know what to do, we do our best with something. We do our very best, and then we say, okay, that didn't work the way I was hoping it would work, but then what else do you do? And here, you have an opportunity, you have the ability to actually know what else you can do and to allow it to connect you to yourself. That's the gift. You know, the ancient Greeks called Eidetics gifts from the gods. And this is why. Because of the gifts that come that nobody ever expects. That goes to the wow, wow, wow. And I'll see you on the next recording.